He's done more for the Republic because 129 regulations. And listen, this is a big boat to turn, right? This is a big boat to turn. They had a plane load of people that were flying out to another country that probably shouldn't be named. And the State Department, the U.S. State Department, the bureaucrats in the State Department made them stop.
Yeah.
And turned them around to Afghanistan with Russia. Over and over. Collusion. Right. The media went all in. If there were property investments in Qatar, they'd be investigating that.
Today, I'm sitting down with a lifelong friend, one who believes the church must shape American politics. And I'm not sure that path really preserves the republic. We didn't script this conversation. We didn't agree beforehand, because what you're about to watch is what Americans, I think, actually want to see when the cameras don't turn into a shouting match. This conversation is the premiere of a new interview series I created called Fireside Chats. Conversations and some debating, but respectful. My goal is simple: slow down the noise, give people room to explain what they believe, and let you hear ideas in full instead of 15-second clips. This is Fireside Chats. If you like content that prioritizes revival of our free republic, where all men and women can have equal opportunity to achieve their own individual aspirations, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. So, today is a special day for me. My first guest is someone many of you may not know, but whose influence you have almost certainly felt. Chad Connelly is founder of the nonprofit Faith Wins, an organization focused on encouraging pastors and churches to engage in the public square. And over the past several years, his team has traveled across the country, meeting directly with clergy, not just conferences, but smaller, trusted gatherings, building relationships inside churches in dozens of states. Faith Wins organizes pastor meetings, voter registration efforts, and distributes voter guides before elections. Chad previously served as South Carolina GOP chairman and later became the Republican National Committee's first National Director of Faith Engagement, speaking to tens of thousands of pastors nationwide about civic participation and cultural issues. If you want to know why the evangelical movement supported Donald Trump, a lot of it has to do with Chad's work. And this interview is very personal. Chad and I grew up together here in Prosperity, South Carolina. We went to church in the same small town, and I've always considered him a lifelong friend. Years ago, I interviewed him on my earlier podcast, Perspective, where you can learn more about his background, and I'll have the links in the comments below to that. It's a long one. It's like almost 2.5 hours, but it's really important to listen to. This time, though, I invited him for a different reason. I asked him to sit down with me and talk about something much bigger, the state of our republic. And we dive into the first year of Donald Trump's current administration and the republic's future. This conversation was not scripted. There were no talking points. My interview style is not confrontational. At least I try to do that way. I want people to speak fully so we can actually understand their belief system. Now, I believe Chad and I ultimately want the same thing, a healthy and free constitutional republic. But as you'll see in the conversation, we really don't agree on all the paths to get there. Chad is a strong supporter of ideas associated with Project 2025. And anybody that's seen my other videos, you know I do not agree with that. I approach this moment from the perspective of my book, Reviving Our Republic. During the interview, you'll occasionally see me stop the video and clarify a question, sometimes explain my viewpoint, and sometimes fact check claims in real time through video inserts. I wrote out those scripts and I shared those clarifications with Chad before airing this video, and I've invited him to respond, either with a statement or hopefully a second conversation. He sent the following email response after I communicated my script. Hey bro, in California at a conference, I won't have time to even read this whole email by tomorrow night. I'll be back late Sunday. Do your schedule as you need. If we have to do follow-up, we can later. Take care. I really appreciated that, Chad. And the reason we're doing this is to really try to understand the crossroads where we are as a country. So with that said, here is my conversation with my childhood friend, Chad Connelly. Chad, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Long time from the yearbook and developing pictures in the darkroom.
So, Chad Connelly, we'll go all into his background here in a second. We had a great video that I'm going to put a link in that we did 2 years ago, which was almost 2 hours.
Was it 2 years?
2 years, 2020.
Wow. Didn't time fly?
Time flies. Oh, it was 2023. But anyway, I'll have the link in there so you can see a lot of background where we had a great conversation. So we won't go all into a lot of life stuff. But what, Chad and I, we've known each other since we've known
church,
anything.
Probably 4 or 5 years
At
old.
least.
Yeah.
At least.
That's right.
Your father and mother were my Sunday school teachers.
And your mom was my science teacher in 5th grade.
That's right.
And Sunday school teacher as well.
But, so
we go way back.
We go way back and have a conversation about you because you know how we are both passionate about the state of our republic, the state of our nation. And I was really looking forward just to sitting down with you and us just having a conversation of faith and trust in each other.
Sure.
Because of our history and everything on what is going on, what is happening to our republic, and what is the future of it. And I just wanted your perspective on that, and us just have a good conversation about it. I just did an article about Trump's first year, and I go into that a little bit, but I want to ask you, without going into Donald Trump or anybody, just in the trajectory of our republic, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's a broad question.
Yes, it is.
And I'm very close to some people in the White House. You know, I don't work with them or work for them, but I'm close to them. I've known them for a long, long time, and I'm moving some of those circles. So I got some interesting insight. I think Trump's the most disruptive president in probably modern American history, at least.
Yeah.
I think the things they've uncovered are the most amazing to me. The fraud, the abuse. I do know people in the State Department. You know, I know a guy who shut down one of the agencies that everybody would know the name of.
Yeah.
And what they've uncovered without going into detail and specifics. And it's stunning. They've talked about for years the deep state. I just reread a book called None Dare Call It Treason from 1964 by John Stormer. And he also wrote Masters of Deceit, I think. And there were just early books about communism, Marxism, just the encroachment into the free enterprise system, into the idea of a republic where it was you're responsible, self-government,
right,
as opposed to intrusive government. And stunning, the deep state. I wasn't sure I bought into the name. I'd always had people who were in Congress say, it's not the president, it's not the Congress, it's the bureaucrats who are there year after year. They know they're going to outlast us. I've had so many congressmen and women tell me that.
Yeah.
I've had former presidents tell me that. I've had people that were chiefs of staff who I'm can text right now, 3 that I know of, that have told me the problem with the republic is the bureaucracy. And the bureaucrats know they're going to outlast an administration, a congressional cycle, an election cycle, and they basically do what they want to do. The thing I'm most excited about the republic is there's a guy named Russ Vought. Russ is a friend, super guy, believer, solid guy. And for every one new regulation put on American business and individuals, he's peeled off 129. And we spoke together at a conference in California, I don't know, it was before Christmas, before Dad died. And just sitting around listening to him tell some of these stories and specifics, it's stunning. And look, we know people are sinful, evil, they're gonna do what's best for them.
Right.
But when there's an intentional effort to destroy the republic, and now there are people that actually wanna put a stop to that, I don't know if they can stop it. I really don't.
Well, I have to be a little honest. I'm not really much of a fan of Russ Vought. Now, I don't know him personally. I haven't sat down with him and broken bread. Well, Project 2025.
What's wrong with it?
I think it is the most dangerous concept to the republic.
In what regard?
In the fact that it looks at how to fix the problem.
Isn't that what you're trying to do?
Looks at how to fix the problem through the lens of central control versus faith in the people.
Yeah, you don't know Russ.
Well, I've read the stuff.
Yeah, but you don't know Russ. So, but when you put things on paper, and Russ was one of the architects who wrote it all down.
Right.
And basically, Project 2025 got cast aside by the Trump administration. But there are things in there that you and I fought for our whole lives.
Like what?
Well, like school choice. Like giving actually the dollars following the kid is one of the great things, is limiting and reducing the size of government.
I understand. I'm not sure if I totally buy into the total concept of full school choice.
Why?
That taxpayers pay for. I'm not sure if I buy into that.
Dollars follow kids?
Not necessarily. Dollars can follow kids, but your dollars...
You don't have kids in public schools, so you're paying for public schools right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would argue that our public schools are destroyed.
Oh, they're absolutely messed up.
So if I, as a taxpayer, can now redirect some of my tax dollars to choice, whether it's homeschool, charter school, private school, whatever, and let parents decide what's best for their kid, I don't think that's government control at all. So you're talking about vouchers probably. Russ Vought is a free choice guy, free will. Let's do it through a tax credit kind of thing, not a voucher kind of thing. Right. So that's more specific than probably you're even aware of. But so I'm not a voucher guy either. I'm a tax credit where dollars follow the kid and parents get to choose what's best for their kid, because it's not a one size fit all. And the government.
Well, but most of the tax credits, where did the tax credits come from? From property tax, because that's what pays for school.
No, tax credits come from, different states are different ways, but basically you replace your income tax. I don't think it's a property tax replacement in any state that I know of.
Well, yeah, but property taxes are what pay for schools, right?
Well, look,
property taxes pay here in Newberry County.
I think property taxes are the most communistic, sinful tax there is. They
predated communism and Marx.
I know they did, but I do think they're the most sinful. I
agree with you.
They're the most punitive. You save, you risk, you earn,
right.
You buy, you protect, you take care of, you maintain. Oh, you got to pay this X dollars to have them.
Well, I understand how it's been abused. Let me be clear right here first. I do believe parents should be able to choose where their children is educated. But choice alone is not an effective system. A voucher is a public money paying private tuition, which is what Chad mentioned. A tax credit is private citizens funding scholarships instead of paying taxes. But I do not believe, as many others don't, that neither one fixes the underlying issues in our public education problems, and especially here in South Carolina. Our schools are funded largely through local property tax wealth. So education quality is tied to the prosperity and property value of a community, and the children are tied to homeowners who live in those communities. Here's the underlying issue that most concerns me. We all accept shared investments in certain institutions, roads, fire departments, law enforcement. We don't say, I never call the sheriff, so I don't have to pay for policing. We don't say, I think the local police chief sucks, so I'll just form my own private police force instead of supporting the one that was made for the community. Yet with education, I constantly hear more people treating it that way. When the most engaged families, the leaders, the volunteers, the stable households leave the foundational system that educates the community's children, they don't just exercise choice. They remove a civic foundation that helps hold the system together. So when I hear well-resourced communities saying, just exit the system, I worry we're not fixing schools, they're just bypassing them and letting them rot on the vine. Public education is not beyond repair. The real reform is structural. So here's the solution I especially have in the book. Instead of tying schools to local property taxes in districts, we should move towards statewide funding, potentially through a broader consumptive tax, and distribute funding per student all over the state. Then families could choose among public schools across districts, with planning and enrollment notice so schools can budget and prepare. That creates choice without creating a two-tiered permanent education system. It shouldn't be public versus private. It is whether we still believe educating all children is a shared responsibility in a republic, that everyone who benefits from a community should actively support the administrative systems inside that community, that were put into place by the democratic process. Let's get back.
Our agreement is government's gotten way too big, way too fast, and how do you cut it down? If you can name, and Mick Mulvaney, who's a friend, was probably has been on it, but I think Russ has been more. I don't know another administration that's actually backed up. And, we've actually backed up the spending. I don't know if you follow Stephen Moore and Unleashed Prosperity and Art Laffer, the Laffer Curve. Their stuff, they're marking and they're saying this is the first administration in 50 years that's actually backed up on spending. We've done balanced budgets by tax cuts or whatever, backed up on spending, which has got to happen. We're at $38 trillion now. And the unfunded liabilities may be as much as $150 trillion.
How much did the last budget, though, that the big, beautiful bill, how much is it going to go over into spending?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that number. I should remember.
It's like, in the trillions, several trillions over budget. Okay, Chad. So if we're going to talk about deficit spending and overspending, let's be clear who's doing it. Check out this graph and look where the biggest dips are in relation to GDP. Just look where they are. What administrations did what? The current president has an estimated $2 trillion deficit in the big, beautiful bill. The current administration is doing nothing to curb overall spending. They're just reshuffling the deck chairs on the fiscal Titanic. But here's the thing.
Trump's a spender too, and Republicans are just as bad as Democrats in a lot of ways. I've always told people, look, Democrats are trying to run us into socialism. They run us over the cliff 100 miles an hour. Republicans are too. They're just trying to keep.
Okay, let's be clear about something. Everybody loves running around hollering socialism, but let's define this. Socialism is government ownership of the economy. The state owns the banks, industry, energy, production itself. Local governments own schools, and local government takes care of firefighters and police. So our local communities use tax money to control those services. The only real federal socialism is actually protected in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7, the U.S. Postal Service. Using tax revenue to help citizens, Social Security, disaster aid, student aid, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, that's a policy choice inside a private property market system. Here's the difference. Socialism is about ownership. Public spending redistributes money. You can oppose the policy, and that's a fair debate, but it isn't Marxist-derived socialism that happened in openly socialist countries like Cuba, Venezuela, Soviet Union, and China. Like the innuendo of the Republican Party talking points imply. Words and meaning still matter.
I don't like it either, but I also think we've got so many, there's not much discretionary left. It's all mandated, fixated. And until we start hitting, let's face it, Social Security, we need to raise the retirement. That's just common sense to me.
Yeah.
People are living longer, and we ought to be giving people choice. Why are we handcuffing these kids into a failed system? Why don't you let them, and that's one of the things
So here's the thing, though, the way I look at all of that, and I really look at saying, okay, the school system is broken, we just need to pull our kids out of it, instead of engaging and making the school system better.
Well, how do you make
that's the problem.
But how do you make it better?
By focusing on changing the school system.
You're never going to change it.
Why?
Why would you change the bureaucrat? Why would a bureaucrat change? You know what'll change it? You know what always changes it? Competition. What? If you look at the states where competition has been introduced, that's where public schools show the biggest improvement. Have you looked at Mississippi? Mississippi schools with far less money are doing better than Connecticut with 2 and 3 times the dollars being spent. And all they did was they introduced a rigorous and robust school choice program that was charter schools, private schools, home schools, whatever, all the above. Texas just had it and they had a rampage. 48,000 parents applied in the first week of registration. Competition forces you to get better.
Absolutely. And I fully agree with that.
That's what I think school choice.
Okay, Chad, I had to look this one up. But the timeline just does not support the idea that Mississippi improved because of school choice. Mississippi's gains began in 2013, the same year they passed the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, a reading reform inside public schools. Their school choice program, and ESA for students with disabilities, didn't start until 2 years later, and it only affected a very small number of children. Over 90% of Mississippi students stayed in traditional public schools while the scores were rising. And in many rural communities and counties, they weren't even private schools nearby, so there was no competition pressure with those schools. So what actually changed? Well, they trained teachers in phonics-based reading instruction. They screened kids early, 3 times a year from K through 3rd grade, and struggling students got individualized reading plans with parental involvement. And if a child couldn't read by 3rd grade, they were retained and given targeted help instead of just being passed along. Here's the tale. The gain showed up first in 4th grade reading, exactly where early literacy reform would appear. After reading improved, math improved too, because kids could finally understand the material. After so many decades of Mississippi being last, they were finally first. If competition from school choice were the cause, you'd expect enrollment shifts or gradual system pressure. But instead, the improvement appeared immediately after the reading law, before the choice program even existed at the scale. So the Mississippi Miracle isn't evidence that kids left public schools or that public schools were pressured by students leaving for private schools. It's evidence that when leadership focuses on fixing the problems and develop solutions and create ways public schools teach children to read early and set clear standards, outcomes change, even in the poorest state in America.
It does.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're a critic of Russ Vought, and you really ought to read his stuff. He's done more for the Republic because 129 regulations. And listen, this is a big boat to turn, right? This is a big boat to turn.
But here's the thing about what I always hear people holler about regulations, is this generic concept of the weight of regulations without getting into what needs to be regulated, right? And very similar thing. Well, yeah. One of the things, like the Telecommunications Act of 1996, and deregulation.
I wouldn't be familiar with that stuff.
Well,
but you're MCI, AT&T.
Well, but it destroyed the ability of local-owned radio, locally owned television, and it created an ability to have monopolies in the media system we have now.
No question.
And that created that.
No question.
So
and yet now with cell phones, everybody's a media outlet.
Well, that's right. But well, that's it. But what I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with having rules to ensure capitalism in communities can work the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Because
when you don't have certain guardrails, capitalism can pull capital into central things. It can create monopolies.
That's deep. And so,
but that's important.
Right. It sure is. Sure it is. And maybe you're right. I have not studied that. No question. Break up a mob bell. No question that it led to what you're talking about. But now we're on a podcast that we're doing in your house in the comfort of a fireplace.
Full democratization of media. I mean, it is absolutely amazing.
And I think the technology opened that up. This would never see the light of day. I don't know how many people are watching, whatever. Those people would never have access to this kind of conversation because it was so controlled by mass media. And I think media, the mainstream press, the corporate press, if you will, they've sold out.
Absolutely.
You watch TV, it's lawyers and it's pharmaceutical companies.
They turned it into entertainment that needs to be funded when deregulation created that.
Maybe so.
Well, it did, because it said, okay, they need to be able to compete on the open market. They can advertise their news now.
But it also created this.
Well, no,
that's always good and bad.
No, that didn't create this.
Eventually it did.
Well, they didn't create it. What it did
it created the demand for it.
It created the demand.
Which demand always follows.
If there would have been 80 owners or 90 owners of media all over the country like it was 50 years ago, this would have still happened. It just would have. It still would have happened. So, but that's what I talk about when I talk about the monopolization of stuff and how we need to break those things back up so that one organization can't own every media outlet.
Yeah, I hate that. No question.
Well, and that takes regulation.
So this is an interesting thing that I think shows to the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. I'm close to Glenn Beck and David Barton and their organization. And when we had the debacle in Afghanistan and Biden's administration abandoned people, those 13 got killed at Abbey Gate. And I've met some of the parents and just makes you sick.
It was absolutely $80 horrendous.
$1 billion worth of equipment that they could have flown a lot of it out of there. They could have driven it out. Anyway, left it. David and Glenn run a group called Nazarene Fund. And they rescue people in persecution from all over the world, all different races, background, everything. And they had better work, and they've done this publicly now, with the Taliban than the U.S. State Department. They had a plane load of people that were flying out to another country that probably shouldn't be named. And the State Department, the U.S. State Department, the bureaucrats in the State Department made them stop.
Yeah.
And turned them around to Afghanistan when the Taliban came on and murdered the people that were coming out.
Yeah.
And the things they did to those people, it's like medieval.
All you've got to see is the plane leaving and the people falling off the side of the plane.
How bad do they want to get
I mean, it was so horrendous, which is...
It's one of the things, how do you imagine that?
Well, here's the thing. As horrible as what Biden and them did in how they neglected and allowed that to happen, the most horrible aspect of that is the fact that we were even there doing the way they're doing it in the first place.
When I was a young lieutenant, they told me, we're never going to leave your carcass in another country, and we're not going to have another quagmire like Vietnam. That's one of the first things they told us in my young lieutenant life in the Army. Those are two things that were just, don't you worry about this, you can count on this.
Yeah.
And instead, I think the military-industrial complex, the bureaucracy, here we are again, we can go down all these rabbit trails with bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy is empowered people getting paid by the government. Military-industrial complex is shareholders and profit.
Still bureaucrats. I mean, look, I got a buddy.
It's
military bureaucrats.
Well, yeah.
Basically, everybody above general staff in the Biden administration with political appointment. They have not worked their way up through the ranks. There was somebody that was somebody's friend. I got a very good friend, a Christian brother. He was a general in a certain rank, and he was in the Pentagon. But he was a white guy, he was straight, and he was a Christian, and a person who was a lesbian black woman ran him out and told him, because you're a white straight guy and a Christian. And he probably had some of the highest combat appearances on multiple planes.
Absolutely.
So to me, that's bureaucracy. It may look different, but it's still the same bureaucracy.
Well, and so we've had that issue for 50 years with power getting leverage, and I see we have it now in the current administration. I mean, I'm sorry, I see people getting appointed to jobs
no question.
that are not eligible for the job.
Always. Everybody always appoints their friends. But I do think this administration has some people in it who are dedicated to actually limiting the size of government, the size and scope, and reducing the intrusion of government. Look, what we saw during the whole Wuhan might have been the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And I don't know.
And where?
The Wuhan, the COVID era. You know, we had people we trusted the media, and you watch all the montages of, them saying the same stinking thing. You're like, you got to be kidding me. Health experts, that we need to rely on them, Mike. And it came down to the local level, and now we know they got paid to tell people stuff. I argue with local people. You got to be kidding me. I was traveling. I literally flew on 3 planes. I did 89 pastor meetings in 2020 in 12 different states. And 3 of those flights, I was on a plane that Delta or American Airlines flew me. And they made me wear a mask. And the stewardess or steward would stand there and make sure I ate my chips and put my
Absolutely. It was
insane.
It was.
So I believe it's way more than government, and maybe it comes from government, but there's been a deterioration of trust and reliability in institutions we need to have faith in.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. And when I hear about people draining the swamp, the thing I'm concerned about is what's happening now. There's nothing being drained. They're just changing the alligators.
Oh, they're draining.
Well, they're not draining.
This is the smallest federal government we've had in a long, long time.
Well,
and federal employees have been cut back. Well, I know that for a fact.
Well, I understand they have, but what is the process?
That's where you start.
No, but all of those were budgeted through Congress. Congress sets the budget and pays. They were fired and they were let go, potentially illegally based on the budget because the money was appropriated for that and just stopped. Now, again, my whole book talks about how we need to reduce the government. The thing that concerns me is that it's all about our rules and we're going to make it happen, whatever, and bringing in and creating Doge just to start throwing people out onto the street when Congress had appropriated money to pay those people. That's the subversion of the checks and balances that we need in government. It does need. But the thing that's most concerning is the total mistrust in seeing the other half of the nation as enemies of the state.
No question.
Well, we saw that with Bondi at the Senate, at the House hearing.
Horrible.
It was absolutely
just cringy.
It was cringing, but that's the atmosphere that has been created when the representatives that are Democrats, she's sitting there with a folder of all their backgrounds so she could go personally after them when they just ask her a question.
Yeah,
it's absurd, but that's the environment that's being created. So the only thing,
I would argue that environment's been created a long time ago.
Well, okay, but that doesn't mean it needs to end.
I'm no apologist for anybody, but Trump's been the most scrutinized, run the microscope down. Oh, yeah.
Not yet.
Oh, my goodness. Indictment. If they'd have had stuff on him, we'd know about it. All these indictments, all these investigations, how many millions of dollars did they spend of taxpayer money to find stuff that wasn't there?
How do you know it wasn't there?
They would have brought it in court. They wanted him guilty. What do you mean? What do you mean?
What about the property investments in Qatar?
I don't even know what you're talking about with that.
Really, Chad? I mean, all I have heard is how corrupted the Biden family was for Hunter being on the board of Bureaucracy, getting a huge salary, and how corrupt that was. And yeah, it was. But now you know nothing about how Donald Trump's family is profiteering off the office more than any president in history. And they're not being charged for it because it's not illegal, but it should be. Well, let's break it down in a way I couldn't do while we were talking in the interview. Since returning to office, Donald Trump's personal net worth has reportedly increased by about $3 billion. And a huge portion of that growth is tied directly to business ventures operating while he is president, especially cryptocurrency and foreign real estate deals. One of those ventures, a crypto company created right before he took office again, has already generated roughly $1 billion for Trump's family. And members of foreign governments bought major stakes in it. At the same time, those same governments were negotiating with the United States over things like trade policy and access to advanced American technology. The United Arab Emirates, home to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, have become the hub for Trump Organization's international expansion, with first sons Don Jr. and Eric serving as emissaries. The president and his family have entered into at least 9 agreements with ties to the Gulf nation, some involving government entities in the country, many stemming from business relationships developed there. Together, the ventures, which include 5 licensing agreements and 3 cryptocurrency deals, will provide an estimated $500 million in 2025 and about $50 million annually for years in the future. Historically, presidents avoided even the appearance of this. Modern presidents from both parties have placed assets in blind trust or divested businesses. Well, Trump has refused to do that. Financial disclosures also show over $430 million in income from overseas developments, with projections that his second term could bring in hundreds of millions more from projects in places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and India, many involving partners connected to foreign governments. The American presidency was designed so foreign powers could never financially benefit the president personally, because once a leader's income depends on foreign deals, the public can no longer know whether decisions are made for the country or the business. It's about the basic rule our founders worried about the most. A republic cannot survive if public office becomes private profit, no matter what party is doing it and which one is constantly demonized for it, as if only one party is guilty. Now, let's get back.
I'm talking about Russia. Over and over and over. Collusion.
Right.
The media went all in. If there were property investments in Qatar, they'd be investigating that too. And this was set up. It wasn't Biden. It wasn't Trump. This was the Obama administration that started the division like it is. I've never seen the division we had. When he appeared in the, Beers in the Rose Garden, this cop goes, he sees a guy, looks like he's breaking in a house. He just goes and says, "Hey man, whose house was my house?" Those 2 guys solved it, and yet the president turned it to a national event, made it about race.
Okay, here we go again with Barack Obama was the one responsible for all our race relation troubles. So let's dive into the scenario Chad just brought up. And honestly, he obviously has forgotten some important details, because in July 2009, Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. returned home from a trip from China. His front door was jammed, so he and the driver tried to force it open. A neighbor saw these two men pushing on the door and called 911, reporting a possible break-in. Cambridge police officer Sergeant James Crowley responded. Gates was already inside his own home when Crowley showed up, and asked for identification. Gates showed a Harvard ID and later a driver's license with the address. So the burglary suspicion was then resolved. But then the argument started after that. According to the police report, Gates, agitated by the situation, accused the officer of racially profiling and loudly protesting. Crowley claimed Gates continued yelling at him outside on the porch and thus creating a disturbance in public view. Thus, Crowley then arrested Gates for disorderly conduct. Not burglary, not resisting arrest, just disorderly conduct. But there's two important things. The charges ended up being dropped by prosecutors within a day or two. The incident became controversial because the arrest happened after the identity and residence were already confirmed, and this was widely reported and in the news. Americans should discuss things like this, and it should be concerning on how far the police can act in someone's own home or on their own property. It was all over the news and actually not resolved. It was actually getting bigger in the news cycle because of the profile of Professor Gates. Now, here's where Barack Obama comes in. At a press conference about healthcare, Obama was asked a direct question by a reporter. He didn't bring it up himself, but his response was, "The Cambridge police acted stupidly." That one sentence is what ignited the far-right media political firestorm. But notice, the controversy wasn't invented out of nowhere. The real debate Americans had was a legitimate one. When police have confirmed someone is in their own home, what authority remains to arrest them for arguing? That's why the country reacted before Barack Obama said anything, not because a president waved a race card, but because it hit a deeper tension Americans have never fully resolved: the balance between police authority and civil liberty. We're still working on that. And Obama did not escalate, but actually tried to de-escalate it with the famous beer summit at the White House. Gates and the officer sitting down together. That was seen as an honest attempt to de-escalate the issue and not exacerbate it. So no, the situation wasn't a closed, settled local issue that then Obama made an issue. It was already a nationally resonant civil liberty question that a reporter asked the president about, and his off-the-cuff answer is what reignited the right-wing response. Let's get back.
He created a race division that I think created division in the country like maybe hadn't happened in so
Let
many
me tell you another view of that. He created an issue in the nation about race because a lot of people weren't ready for that race to be in the White House. A lot of I heard him talk about it, Chad.
He won twice.
But that doesn't mean there wasn't a large group of people who were pushing back on him because they didn't.
And there haven't been a lot of people pushing back on Trump for whatever reason.
It's not about the comparison. We're talking about the issue of Obama didn't create the division. Obama rose up, and the division happened in reaction to him being there.
I think Obama made everything about race because he wanted to. And his wife made everything about race. I don't think he made everything about race. I think he made everything about race. They played the race card. Michelle Obama said just recently how it was, nobody really liked her. I'm like, oh, good gracious, you got elected twice. You guys were in the White House for 8 years. You had a staff of 130 or something like that. What are you talking about? You were able to do whatever you want to do, and you're still complaining about it? I just think we all got stuff in our life, everybody, that we can stay on and stay on and stay on. And if we go back and pull those wounds out and pick the scab, all we're going to do is make it worse. Unity doesn't look that way. Unity doesn't look like we're going to make an issue out of a guy who happened to be a white cop checking out a house that looked like it's being broken into. I think that exacerbated the problem. It poured gas on something that I think was so much better. Look, you and I were brought up in a place where nobody talked about that stuff. We had black friends. They had white friends. We spent the night with them. They spent the night with us. My mom and dad never said, you're a white guy, that's a black guy. They never had that conversation.
But here's the thing.
Does that mean there weren't people that way? No, of course not.
Do you remember my Uncle Dud? You remember Dud? Uncle Dud? He lived at behind the gin house. Okay. He was my dad's favorite guy. He ran the Klan here.
I don't.
He ran the Klan.
When did he die?
He died in 1980, right? 70, late 70s. Anyway, he was my father's, he was Hubert Bedenbaugh's uncle.
Okay, I didn't know him.
So what I'm saying is the concept of how everybody got along is a veneer over some real damage that we're still dealing with. That wasn't discussed.
I don't doubt that.
Right. But I'm saying it can't be minimized when people bring it up, because people need to tell their stories. And I'm not saying it needs to be dwelled on and say this is all that it's about. But the issue of exacerbation of a white cop going to a guy that's a black guy trying to get into his own house and turning it into what it did was an example of certain assumptive prejudices that tend to be assumed, right? That people tend to overreact to. And that's all that was. I don't blame Obama for that.
I just thought he made something out of those two guys, solved something and showed how people can work together. Look,
Obama did that. He had them both sitting there at the thing and having a beer. I mean, he showed that.
We can disagree about that. I think Obama stepped on the race card in so many ways. But listen, I don't think the division today is solely stuff like that. I think now this is being bought and paid for and created. I think it's a reason this isn't the sanctuary cities, that all the riots are taking place and the disruptions. And ABC News did a thing. I was preparing for a TV hit, and there were people literally turning over, burning cars and dancing on them. ABC News said, well, they just enjoy dancing on cars.
Chad, that kind of comment is exactly how conversations fall apart. A clip of a few people acting stupid doesn't define everyone who was there. Every large crowd in America, sports, celebrations, political rallies, even college parties, has a handful of idiots. TV shows the most dramatic moment, not the most representative one. I'm not defending vandalism, of course. People who damage property should be held fully accountable. But reducing whole groups of people to they just like dancing on cars, I mean, it's not helpful. And it's just stereotyping. And once we stereotype, we stop trying to understand what's really happening. Let's get back.
That's the insanity that ought to be called out, that the corporate media is giving cover. Those people are funded by leftists who want to disrupt and destroy. I don't think they're really rioting. They're getting their paycheck at the beginning of the week. I know people, churches around the country who've taken water and food to rioters and found out they're just a job to them. It's just a job.
You know, I keep hearing that. I was down at the No Kings rally. The people down there weren't being paid to sit there and hold
I don't think
signs
anybody's going to pay in South Carolina.
Well, but even there, I've got my past stepdaughter, Audrey, is up there. People are up in Minnesota, up in Minneapolis.
My right-hand guy lives in Minneapolis.
Right. And so the thing that we tend to get in the middle of, especially when discussing these big issues, is there's always going to be some radicalization on something, right? There's always going to be that. And you can always find examples on Facebook and they're going to get 10,000 likes, which just means 10,000 people, which is nothing.
Nothing.
But that's grabbed hold of and then elevated as if that's what everybody's doing. And that's what's getting in the way, because what happened to Alex being shot in the back 10 times is a horrible abuse of power. I mean, it just is.
Horrible.
It's horrible, but that was created. So it's not about the leftists up there being paid to riot. It's about a federal intrusion of government. What is happening, this is my opinion of this, what is happening that happened in Minneapolis and that happened in other states is exactly what Madison and Hamilton warned in the Federalist Papers. An overreaching federal government politicizing events and going into a place that they could safely do it because this is where the leftists are. This is where the Somalis are. And they use that as a cover. I had two police chiefs between the girl that got shot in the car and Alex. I had two police chiefs say, what would you do to the people who shot those guns, those policemen? And they say, if they were in my police department, every one of them would have been let go and indicted for murder. Because they broke the protocol of how you do stuff.
It's so emotional because you can't even grasp all this stuff, right? And this is so much more than we can do in a 30-minute whatever conversation.
Absolutely.
I think we're talking about symptoms. When you look at causes, the cause of this is the Biden administration broke federal law to let in a bunch of illegals, first thing. They clearly
did he break federal law? I'm not saying what he did good. I'm just saying what federal law did he break?
People walking over and coming into, they claimed asylum.
Right.
Well, there's a way to do asylum. That's to go to a border patrol and say, I want to claim asylum. It's not just coming through. It's not the federal government tearing down fences of a sovereign state and saying, come on in.
Listen, I was down there and I saw it. I saw the actual abuse.
It's unbelievable.
It's horrible.
However, but that's the cause, Mike. And then when you look at places like Minneapolis, let's talk about sanctuary cities. You got cities and states that say, come here, you're illegal.
So I need to push back on this a little bit because I'm constantly hearing this issue on sanctuary cities, especially on social media. And when people say the word sanctuary city, they often believe, like my friend Chad here, is that city is inviting and encouraging illegal immigration. That's really not what the policy is about. That's what they're trying to position it as. This is really a federalism issue, the division of power between the local government and the federal government. Immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility. Cities and counties are not federal law enforcement agencies. Local police are hired and funded to handle local crime, theft, assault, drugs, violence, not to operate as an arm of federal authorities. So why do some cities adopt these type of policies? One, they believe in federalism, but because also local officials believe that every traffic stop becomes immigration investigation, then the people in the communities will stop cooperating with local police. They'll stop reporting crimes, calling 911. And for their issue, that is a public safety problem. Sanctuary policies don't legalize anyone. They simply say local police will not detain someone solely for federal civil immigration violations unless they have a federal warrant. Constitutionally, that reflects a very old policy in America. Local governments retain the authority to decide how their own police resources are used. If Washington, D.C. wants stricter enforcement, the solution isn't forcing cities to do it for them. The solution is Congress fixing the federal immigration law and funding federal enforcement adhering to the rule of law. This is not about encouraging open borders. It's about whether the federal government can commandeer local police. And our constitutional system has always said, for the most part, no.
Have you ever met any of the girls' parents that had their heads bashed in by an illegal alien?
I've seen people who got their throats cut in prosperity in a fight. I mean,
symptoms?
But here's the thing.
These are
constantly elevating the crime of illegal aliens. It's just like bring up crime of everything.
It's the cause. These are totally preventable crimes. So Lake and Riley's parents came to a church event we had in her state. Mm-hmm. And when you listen to their testimony of their kids just out running, if that was my daughter, I'd be spitting mad. But I wouldn't be worried about the symptom of sanctuary cities. I'd be worried about, we got to close the border. Trump did that. He fulfilled that. No border crossings. Now you can deal with the problem. It's a little bit like the budget stuff. You got to start somewhere. It's a big boat to turn. And so in a year, we've actually started turning the boat. I think we are back to 55 miles an hour trying to do it instead of 100 miles an hour running us off the cliff. Debt's a problem. I'm on a national balanced budget amendment board.
I understand.
I get that.
Well, here's the thing about the immigration issue. It was absolutely abused without a doubt. Many people I know, they did get that little asylum thing as they went through. I know
very, 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 very few.
Well, I know
it's like
dozens of people. So here I am working in this community. I have Hispanics who come and put on the roof and do different things in here. Mm-hmm. I've lived with these people. I know teachers that teach these children. And none of them look like the overgeneralization that's being communicated about who they are. Many of these people are contributing to the society. Now, here's the other thing. When I sat down with Sheriff Roy Boyd in Texas, he sat there and told me, this is not an immigration issue, it's a human trafficking issue.
100%.
So
100%.
what happened when the idiotic policy of the Biden administration said, actually, when Trump left in 2020, he said, the border's going to be wide open, they're going to flood in. And these idiots actually let it happen.
They did.
Oh, so anyway, besides
that. It is a
that,
human trafficking deal.
but because what happened, you had the cartels tapping into the human emotion down there in the villages of Guatemala and saying, come and live a better life, which they want to do. Yeah. People that are willing to work. Yeah. The vast majority are wanting to work, but
not of the 20 million that came in. No way. Not of the 20 million that came in. Listen.
Wait, let me just finish the thought. The vast majority of these people that came over are wanting to participate, because I've seen them when they come here.
I disagree. The ones that want to participate, I want them to go through the process. So I'm in Ubers all the time. I'm in Ubers. I've been in, you name a city, I've been in an Uber. Almost always, it's an immigrant. Almost always, I dive in this conversation. What do you think? And most of them, many of them, not most, many of them pull their passport out and say, I did this right. This is wrong, what's going on. Mm-hmm. This is wrong for the country. I'm contributing. I pay taxes. It took me 11 years. It took me 9 years. One guy in DC took me 13 years. Let's take the Somalis in Minneapolis. I want to be a contributing member. 80% are on welfare. That's not contributing. That's not contributing. The guy who works for me in Minneapolis, when he's moving, his in-laws aren't doing good. They moved back there from the Chicago area. He's got a rental car. Somali kid hits him, hits the thing, comes out cursing, doesn't know any English, and takes off before the cops got there. Probably had no insurance. He just leaves Bob with it. It is destroying society. And let's think about what it's doing to the schools, what it's doing to the healthcare. Listen, the more of these people that'll immigrate and get out of here, it'll take a load of pressure. Look what's doing to housing costs in those places. When they're out of there, guess what? Housing costs come down because rent controls, the government's pushing Somalis and other immigrants in here. They're hurting Americans. If somebody wants to contribute, I don't know many people anywhere who don't want to help those people contribute and assimilate. But a lot of those folks, they don't want to assimilate, especially the criminals. I got a guy in a church, and I won't name the state because he confided. I got him to some friends of mine in the State Department. He was a high official who was an accountant in an administration in a country everybody knows the name of. He was like number 2 in the accounting, helping them hide. And he was the first one, probably this was years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, who told me that this is a human trafficking. They're selling kids, they're selling men, women, and children, and they're making a ton of money. It's the cartels driving it. And these countries are dumping their criminals here to disrupt America. So he has met with officials in the U.S. And let's just say that's when you look at what's Cuba, 7% of their population came here. I think Venezuela is higher than that. I think Guatemala is 5 or 6%. Somali's 7 or 8%. When you got a failed state and those people come here to just disrupt and to drain our resources, I got a problem with that.
Well, here's the thing. That is a huge overgeneralization, Chad.
But yours is too.
But
yours is too. Most people don't come here wanting to assimilate.
Why?
Look around. 80% of Somalis are on welfare. That's not assimilation. Mike, we give them a place to live. We give them food stamps to eat by. We give them driver's license. They're giving them CDLs in some of these blue states. They are giving people who come out unqualified. All these people, I met a family who lost their family members to a drunk driver who's an illegal. Now, yes, drunk driving accidents happen all the time. Yeah. But if it's an illegal who's given a CDL by a state, this is beyond comprehension that anybody would support that.
So where does the federal come in versus the state being able to have?
Look, I'm a 10th Amendment guy. This goes back to, how does a Gavin Newsom run his state in the ground and have $240 billion for a high-speed rail? Not a track's been laid, and nobody can find where the money went.
Well, that's what this California has to figure out.
Well, but when people leave, that's
the self-regulation of that.
But I know that. But they're ruining their country. They're ruining the state.
Well, that's up to Californians to deal with. That's what happened.
There are good people there.
Well, fine. Let them deal with it.
I think they're trying to. I'm going out there next week to speak. Yeah. And there are plenty of people who are doing, Shamgar in the Old Testament. This is my bean field. I'm going to fight this bean field. Right. I'm going to stay here and fight. But people are leaving. Look at U-Haul gave Gavin Newsom their Man of the Year award, and kind of tongue-in-cheek laughing about it. But Texas and Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida are reaping the benefit of a bunch of people coming here. They're sick of it. My son bought a house in Nashville. We're going to see him next week. We're up at NRB, and he had a guy in the neighborhood who bought a house, and they were having this conversation, and he said, when he talked to the realtor, look, you got a deal if you'll put an American flag up. And the realtor's like, okay, why is that? He said, the final straw for me was when an Antifa member came on my yard, took my flag down and burned at my yard. That day we put the house for sale and we moved here. We started researching on the internet. So people vote with their feet and they leave that stuff, and maybe you're right. Maybe states just need to fail.
I mean, when we had Jim Crow here, all the black folks had to go to Chicago. We've always had issues where states did bad things.
And it works itself out, probably.
It does. Well, of course it does.
But here's what's different. The Biden administration, through COVID, funded the bailout of a lot of these states. Now there's no funding for that. Now we're going to find out what are you made of.
Chad, really? Here you go again with that selective outrage, brother. Yes. Biden signed in 2021 the American Rescue Plan, a huge $1.9 trillion package. About $350 billion went to state and local governments during COVID to help replace lost tax revenue, prevent layoffs of teachers, police, and firefighters. Now, did it get abused? And do states and communities need to be accountable for lost monies? If they were, of course. And was it good policy? Well, that's debatable. Should the federal government bail out towns and states? But Chad, was it debatable in 2020 when Trump passed the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, signed by Donald Trump, was a $2.2 trillion economic stimulus package to address the COVID-19 pandemic's economic fallout. Key provisions: stimulus payments, enhanced unemployment benefits, the Paycheck Protection Program. But we don't have to go back there. Let's address this past year of Donald Trump's foreign payouts. After tariffs against China hurt exports of soybeans, and I'm not really sure if they understood that China was the largest customer of American soybeans. Well, guess what? China retaliated and stopped buying American crops. And Trump then had to write a bailout check to Argentina when China started buying soybeans from them instead of from American farmers. And because of that, the federal government ended up paying $28 billion directly to American farmers to help cover their losses. Now, as an aside, I can also throw in the Supreme Court fulfilled its obligation to protect the Constitution and say the tariffs were not constitutional, but that's an aside. So I'm really sorry, but just repeating Biden, Biden, Biden on every problem is focusing on the splinter in someone else's eye while ignoring the plank in your own. This isn't a Democrat problem. It's not a Republican problem. It's a power problem. And the real story is this: our central government now stabilizes states, industries, and voting blocks. And the question isn't who did it, because they both do. The question is this: do you think it will ever be stopped if everyone on one side insists it's only the other side doing it, and forget your side's doing it too?
What are you going to do with this? Because look at all the companies who are leaving.
Well, every administration's been funding whatever they policy issues or what they want
to that extent. $9 extra trillion that didn't need to go out. Man, man.
Well, yeah, but that's why we have to bring the tax issues of all our money going to the federal government.
No doubt.
Versus that.
No doubt. I probably got a wrap. I got to go take a dog to a vet.
That's fine. Thank you.
Well, look, I love our conversation, and but I think we need to talk about not symptoms, but let's go back to causes. And it's a big boat to turn.
So here's what I need your help with. If you believe in what I've written in the book, do you believe we should have a more multi-party system?
How do you get there? It's a whole different discussion.
Well,
how do you get there?
Through what I put into the book. That's how we get there, by breaking up the monopolies of the party.
How do you do that? Now
by creating more way of people to where the two parties don't control the voting mechanism.
Again, it happens. Maybe this is one of those destructive things that happens over time, like we were talking about with the states. Maybe that's what happens. It's happened with parties in the past. The Federalist Party, the Anti-Federalists, the Whigs, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
The Republican Party was founded to get rid of slavery. get rid of polygamy and slavery were the two things that they put forth in the platform originally. Maybe that happens over time. I do think what happened, I decided to be involved in a party I thought I could fix. My own party, some of the consultants kicked me off the platforms. I was too pro-life and too Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those are my friends, right? These are people who've helped me in the past. Some of them I got involved. Some of them who helped me a ton, right? So I'm just as frustrated. But also, I know to go recreate something over here. What I do with the pastor network is try to push them toward issues, not toward parties. I tell them Jesus ain't running, not voting for a party or a person, and I can't hide behind my past, right? I mean, I'm party chair, but I can work in there to influence, which is why I work on issues. Because I think that's the way to do it.
So go through my thing and see how we can use it to influence, to do, because my recipe is to do exactly what we've been talking about, to have a more federal state like we should, more responsibility, and states have the fiscal ability to fund what they need to fund instead of begging for grants back out of the state, which the representatives have created.
Yeah, I would love that. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's a big mess. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, brother.
Love you, brother.
Appreciate it. That was great. And Chad and my friendship will survive the discussion we have, and well, at least that's my sincere hope. A republic only works when citizens discipline themselves, when we're willing to question our own side as much as the other, because self-government requires self-governance within ourselves. If we lose that, no election can save us. I'm Mike Bedenbaugh, author of Reviving Our Republic. And Chad, I hope you finally finish reading the copy I gave you a year ago and start sharing it with your friends in power that you name drop on the show, so we can have a platform to begin the revival of our federal republic. Finally. Take care.